Welcome to the Moulding Live Show, where we tell the amazing stories of everyday people that are committed to building a better life for themselves and those around them, and in turn, build generational wealth. In this episode of the show, we speak to Thando Pato about the release of her new book called On the Rocks, Memoir of a High-Functioning Alcoholic. Thando Pato, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you on board. Thanks very much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
So we're talking about something really exciting, and I want you to show us the cover just now again, but your book launch is imminent in a few days, actually. Can you show us the book?
Sure. This is the cover of the book.
Yeah. So we'll go into that just now, but I mean, it's called On the Rocks, Memoir of a High-Functioning Alcoholic. I love the title. I love the graphics. It reminds me of that movie. I don't know if you watched the one with Tom Cruise. It's called Cocktail. It reminds me of, it's that same type of feel to it. So I love the colors. Was it difficult to pick that out?
No. I think once we started discussing covers, the thought, first it was coming up with a name. So that was the most stressful part of it. But once we came up with a name, everything else flowed. And I didn't want a depressing cover. I was just like, already the subject matter is a bit sensitive. And I think the book is not depressing. It just tells a story, hopefully with some humor. And so I wanted the cover to be inviting, and because when you are a high functioning alcoholic, life is lit. Like, you're having a good time. You don't quite understand that actually I have a problem. So I literally thought about the cover concept. And I explained it to my publisher, Melinda Ferguson, and I said, this is what I want. And for a long time we did back and forth, and she didn't want to put in the circle. And I said, the circle is so important because it gives it's like it's a club or a restaurant, so people are going to be like, okay, and then want to know more.
I agree. I love it. It actually does remind me of, the neon signs you get in a club or a bar.
Exactly.
So it's like authentic with a story, in many ways, which is amazing. So we'll go, there's so many different ways we'll go down this route, but I think to frame it for anyone that obviously doesn't know Thando Pato, and maybe why you wrote the book as well, can you give us a brief, if someone met you for the first time and said, what do you do? Is there something that kind of screams to mind?
Look, ultimately, I'm a storyteller and a writer. My career has been focused around that in different ways. So I studied journalism, and then I worked in women's magazines, Oprah magazines, True Love, Marie Claire, Sunday Times Lifestyle. I freelanced for a long time. And then I moved into corporate communications, where I've been playing for the past 5-6 years. Currently in corporate communications. I work in internal communications. But I like writer storyteller. So as
I love that. I love the storyteller stuff, and I think lots of people that are in communication, I think it's I wouldn't say it's a forgotten art. Maybe it's not an uncovered art as yet, but the whole storytelling, I think is amazing. I think whether that comes from a brand, marketing, like small businesses. I think we had a conversation many years ago. That's kind of the first time our paths crossed. But, when we were talking about something similar as well, it's like, I think every company, obviously that's my thing, but every company should have like a compelling story. I think people don't put enough emphasis on that. And I think there's definitely a space for more people like you that can help us tell a story. Because I think you forget how to tell a story or even understand what a good story is. I think that's a whole different discussion. But today we're talking about your book, and I think I want to let you introduce it in terms of, firstly, why you wanted to write the book, because in my opinion, in my world, I think writing a book is amazing, but you just showed us the physical copy, and like even seeing it, in the flesh must be amazing. But tell us
It,
how that is.
absolutely. So I got my author's copies yesterday. So the book comes
Amazing.
out on the 9th, will be available countrywide on the 19th of May. And it was just like amazing, like I screamed. It's like, oh my God. I'm like, ah!
Yeah. Cool.
Because I've been, when you write a book, it's a whole process. People think you just write and then somehow a book appears, and there's the actual writing of the manuscript, which is a very solitary process, because you're recalling things, you're framing things, you're deciding whether to leave things out, what to add. At the same time, you've got the imposter syndrome loud, and you're saying, "Ooh, girl, I don't know about this."
And then
So
you can say it a bit.
so you've got a lot going on, and then you hand over the manuscript, and you worry, like, oh my goodness. So like, I tried so hard not to bother Melinda and be like, what do you think? And lucky she was great with feedback and saying, I love this, I love that, I love this, I love that. And she'd read the first 16,000 words, which is why she agreed to publish it in the first place. So I had written it. So let me take a step back. Why I wrote the book. I always wanted to write a book, and I always thought I'd write a biography about somebody. And I discussed it with Melinda, and for about 2 years, we went back and forth with possible ideas. And then I did a writing workshop with her, and I was very raw and very, very tender. And it was in 2018, after I'd been diagnosed with cancer. I had a double mastectomy with implants, and I said to her, I think I have a drinking problem. In fact, I said, no, I don't think, I know I have a drinking problem. And I want to write about that, but I can only do it when I'm sober. And so I kept doing writing workshops with her and exploring the topic and stuff, but I wasn't getting sober. In fact, my addiction, I was getting deeper and deeper and deeper into my addiction. So lockdown, I think the universe, God, decided this one is not getting the message in Joburg.
So is COVID your problem then?
Yeah. So I moved to Cape Town. I got a job in Cape Town, and I moved to Cape Town to live with my mom. And then COVID started, and I didn't have access to alcohol. So I remember the day the lockdown started, like the day before, I'd gone to the grocery store and I bought 3 bottles of wine, and I told myself, okay, it's 21 days, it'll be fine, And on the 30th of March, I said, okay, that's it, I'm not drinking. And lockdown unfolded, and I suffer from anxiety and depression. So that just was amplified as I stopped drinking. I didn't have, I actually did have access to alcohol. I worked with a colleague whose family owns a wine farm. So they were bootlegging stuff.
Sure. Proper. and you're in Cape Town as well. So I'll be like, there's plenty of those.
And I knew people like who were like, no, I've got to connect, and they deliver. I've got this, that. So there was, it's not that I didn't have access to alcohol, I just didn't have physical, quick access to it. So when I was about 6 months sober, I called Melinda, and I said, listen, I've been sober for this long. I think I'm ready to tell the story. And she said, okay, write and send me whatever you put together. We didn't put timelines on it or anything. So I started when, and people always think, oh, you're a writer, you just write, just. it doesn't work like that.
You would know.
And when I was about 9 months sober, I started writing in earnest, and I would write 500 words a day. That was my ritual. I gave myself like an hour, and it was the aim was to put down not less than 500 words a day. And that 500 words a day grew into 16,000 words, which I sent to Melinda in February of 2021. And she loved it. She was like, yes. But I have to present to my big bosses. And so we then went into, packaging it and writing synopsis and this and that, and they liked it. And then there was a sort of silence, and then I continued writing, but there was a bit of a silence because Melinda was busy on other projects. She's always publishing stuff, and I stopped writing. And I think it was also what I realized is some of the stuff I was actually processing as I was writing, so it was quite difficult. So to write about stuff and think, to think back on it and to feel and I had to keep reminding myself throughout the process of writing is that I wanted to write a book I wanted to read. So I like honest autobiographies where people are candid about their lives. You don't have to hang out your dirty laundry, but just be candid about what you were feeling. So I tried to be that. And then in September, Mel came back to me and she was just like, listen, they want the book next year to come published May. I need the manuscript by December. So then now it's just this mad scramble to put it together. And yeah, but I did it, and I handed it to her in December, and at the end of January, she came back to me with edits, and then we did back and forth, editing, proofreading, it went to an editor. So there's a whole process in the writing where you keep reading your same words and you're proving this, you're proving that. And after a while, you're just like, oh, I just don't want to see it anymore. Or can it come out? Because everything is on email, PDF, and sticky notes, and this and that. And so to see it finally in this is it's like, wow, like I can't wait to see it on shelf. Like I keep going into exclusive books and smiling and be like, my book's gonna be there.
No, that's amazing. I mean, congratulations, because I think that is an amazing, accomplishment. I think, as you said as well, seeing it in the bookstores that we know and love, like exclusive books, will be amazing. I think that is incredible. I think that's the first thing, even without talking about, why and, how that writing process is. I remember many years ago, I read a book from Guy Kawasaki, I think it is, and he writes a lot. But he said, like anyone can get a digital book done. No, not anyone, but you can get it done, published on Amazon Kindle. But he said going through that whole publishing process and having someone like you said, Melinda, and then having editors and going through that, that whole manuscript part, it forces you to almost like align to how the industry is, and in itself almost like vet the idea for you. And did you find the same?
Absolutely. I mean, because it had been between Melinda and I, so it was sort of like I sent a chapter here to a friend or there, but it was like this thing between Melinda and I trust Melinda. But it was when Sean, the editor, read it, and he wrote me a beautiful email, and he was just like, it's very well written and considered, and there's no self-pity that usually goes with these books. You just tell a story. And then it was like, oh, okay, it's getting out there. And then when you send it to, because we need cover shots, so you need to send it to the people. I've got Justice Malala, Sam Cowan, and Kojo Bafo. I had to send it to them to read. And that was another process of like a vetting process of sorts, because their feedback comes back and you're like, oh, okay. So it definitely is, it, it helps to prepare you for when the book comes out. You don't know, because of course, once it's out there, there are going to be different reactions, but it gives me a self-belief that, okay, what I intended for this book was achieved. How it's received
Yeah, you
is
can't.
another story.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. You can't control that. I mean, you can just do your bit, and I think you've done your
Yeah,
bit, with flying colors, and like, and the vetting of the idea, just by virtue of you going through the process, like the vetting of the idea and the product is already out there. I like how you said, like you got other people to review it as well. The link with Sam Cowan, she's a radio personality, right?
yes. So radio personality, and she actually wrote a book about her because she's a recovering alcoholic as well. And in 2017, when I took a sabbatical from drinking, I read her book On the Rock. No, her book is From Whiskey to Water. And
Okay.
I definitely recommend it. It's a very well written and considered book. And so she's published by Melinda. So when we were going through our list of people who we think would be good for cover shouts, that people recognize and respect. For me, I'm like, I'm a fangirl if you can get Sam Cowan to do it.
Hmm.
And she got Sam to do it, and
Wow.
she said the loveliest things about my
Hmm.
book, and it's just like, wow.
No, actually, that was a brilliant strategy. I mean, I didn't know that in terms of the link, but I mean, that's a brilliant strategy as well. If definitely Sam had a successful book out already, I mean, there would be a audience around that. I'm thinking like marketing now, but like there would be an audience around that, and I mean, getting that that validation from someone
Sure.
as famous as that. This is amazing. So yeah, it all just adds credibility, to the whole thing.
Mhm.
Um, Going into the meat of it now a little bit. I mean, the one thing that stuck out for me is I think you mentioned in the epilogue, which is, drinking is so part of our culture. And, I've got stories as well, but it's like, it's like in everything we do. And I think, even with me, I'm like on my, on my family side, it's like, I mean, extended family, my cousins and stuff like that. It's like so rare to go to a function and not have alcohol. It's just like, we just don't do it, and it's so easy. I mean, I actually left one of my jobs because it was one of those things that you can't really control. And, my wife, Ingrid, I mean, I think, because she never worked in corporate, she could never understand, some of that peer pressure that you get. And it always just starts with one drink. I mean, let's just go for a drink. And that in itself is a problem because it's never one drink. I love how you said that. And, if you can unpack that a little bit for us, I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think the epilogue came to me. It was actually Sean, the editor, who said do an epilogue. I mixed that whole epilogue in a chapter, and he said, no, 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 no. You are saying something very pertinent here, and it needs to stand out by itself because you are summarizing why you wrote this book and the challenges around drinking. And I think I wanted people to understand I'm not that self-involved that I don't have context, because there's some people who are going to read this book and they're going to be like, but you don't have a problem. Like, this is not a serious problem. Like, your life wasn't falling apart. Like, you're being dramatic. Or I know somebody who drinks more than that. Or, because, and, as I think what took me a long time to realize I had a problem was I also had those kind of comparisons. I was like, oh, but my life is not falling apart. But I go to work, but I function, but this. So I made excuses. And I think we pretty much, that is the culture around drinking. It is like, if the veneer of respectability is there on the surface, then you're fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, are you getting your job done? have you been arrested? Have you gone to work drunk? No. Are you paying your bills? No, like, what? You're knocking back a bottle a night? Dude, I know worse, so we excuse it, and as because we excuse it, I found is that I got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And I worked in a job where it was PR and communications for an international brand, and we traveled with journalists, and journalists, especially motoring journalists, drink.
You probably shouldn't be telling us that.
I was drinking with them, like, so we'd go on international trips, do what we have to do in the evenings, have some wine with dinner, and it was part of being sociable. Nobody thought, I didn't think, but I was uncomfortable in 2016 with it felt like rinse and repeat. I was like in one big haze of drinking. And I just did not feel in control of it. I admitted to myself, I don't feel like I'm in control. I need to almost just step back and take a break. And that is where the book kicks off from that perspective.
No, I love that. I mean, I can resonate with it. And I think, I mean, you touched on such an important point, because I think when you're in that culture and, and it's normal. I worked in two companies, and, in both those companies, the two I'm thinking about around drinking, but, my manager was like the head of the company. So, I mean, it was okay because we definitely came the next day drunk sometimes, or you thought you were anyway. But, you spend the whole day recovering from that hangover. And I can't see how you could be productive. And I think, for me on a personal level, I think once I decided I'm going to stop, at least, I mean, I still drink every so often, but, not as much as, we used to. And definitely, I mean, I can remember the last time I drank, as an example, but it was always like, yeah, you were never at your peak potential. I think that's the way I would put it. It's like, yeah, as you said now, it's like, it's like a haze. And once
and you're tired and you're irritable, and ironically, you want to drink again so that you can feel normal. So it's like you're on this Ferris wheel.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think the other word that came out, and it was quite early in the book as well, was the shame aspects. And I thought, I resonated with that as well. Shame, maybe guilty, because, like you would get, and I think what changed it for me as well was like when we had children, and I remember thinking, like, would I want, our little one, little daughter at that time, to see me in that stage, when I got home. And I thought, like, obviously something has to change. And for me, it was as drastic as, I had to leave the company because I couldn't control the environment, and it was just the way it had to be. I don't regret it at all, but I mean, and there's hard choices, like you said now as well. It's like, you have to leave a certain environment. I think for you, like in many ways, it was forced in a way, by everything happening around us, which was a saving grace. But the fact that you could be brave enough to do that was amazing. And then tell the story, which is even cool. But around the shame and the guilty part, was that a big thing?
Yeah, because that's what actually alerted me to that I have a problem, was how it was starting. Like, I tell myself, I'm not going to drink tomorrow. I'm not going to drink. Like, I'd wake up from my hangover and I'd be like, I'm not going to drink for the rest of the week. I need to take a break. And then I'd find myself drinking. And then I'd berate myself. And there was just this sense of I didn't have control, and shame around that I couldn't. Why can't I just not? Can I go through a week without drinking? And even if I did go through a week about drinking, I'm obsessing about drinking. like, when can I drink? When can I get that drink? And when I get that drink, it's never just, one drink. In that moment, it can be one drink, but I know that tomorrow, the day after, it's like a floodgate is going to open. And that's where the shame and the feelings of guilt arose from, the constant obsession with it, the feeling of not being in control, betraying myself, as I would say. Like it was like I was constantly betraying myself.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, and there's something about society. I mean, as I said, it was like not just one drink, but it's amazing how that kind of snowballs, especially with the right social circle, I suppose. Like there's certain people, but it's almost like when you tell people that you're not drinking as well, it almost like seems like you're a leper. And I think and obviously you've been through this now, but once you get through that first hurdle, um, that social circle, then people probably accept it. But as you said, once you do that one drink, then it's like, okay, you do drink. And then, obviously, all the gates are broken. But um, yeah, so thanks very much for saying that. I mean, and is there anything, I mean, around your journey, around, this, moving away from drinking? I mean, is there anything around that journey that taught you a lot more about yourself? I mean,
Absolutely. People say, how has life changed since you stopped drinking? Sorry, I have a lisp that has developed in adulthood because I grind my teeth when I
okay.
speak. So my jaw has moved.
Hmm.
So sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm a bit self-conscious about it. So in terms of what happens when you stop drinking, life doesn't become easier. But what I find is that I have capacity. I have emotional capacity for myself. I'm present in how I feel. I can think about things. I can dissect things. I can heal from things. I just have capacity. And I have capacity. I have boundaries. That's the other thing, is I didn't have boundaries before. So I worked all hours of the night and day. I basically didn't have a personal life because I was always working. And then if I wasn't working, I was drinking. Um, and I think I allowed people to too close to me, and I just didn't have a sense of myself. And I think over the last 2 years, the sense of the understanding of myself has become so much clearer, that actually this is who I am. This is what I like. This is what makes me tick. This is what aggravates me. This is just understanding myself has made life so much easier. Because I know myself now. I'm like, no, I don't do that. I don't want to be a part of that.
Mm, mm,
Whereas before there was this sort of gray area. I don't know why. I didn't know myself. My
mm,
relationship with myself was very, very fractured, which is why in the book I write a lot about my therapy sessions, because I want people to understand, that therapy was key for me in building my relationship with myself and making me realize I had a problem, because I went to therapy because I was having issues with relationships, and like, why can't I keep a relationship?
yeah.
And in the first session, my therapist was like, "You're an alcoholic."
Nice. Good
Not why I'm
therapy
here.
there.
Not why I'm here.
Mm,
So that, for me, that's what stopping drinking has given me, like, such capacity. Like, I can't explain to you. I have capacity for my family, for my friends, and for myself, that I never had before, because I was tired and irritated and just, yeah. And now I can also look at relationships differently, like with people. Like you can see, I can see a person now. I'm like, oh, so this is how we've been operating. Like, it's not working for me, or oh, it's working for me, or this is how I was. Like it's like a whole world has opened up.
That's amazing. I was actually just writing down there, which you touched on very nicely, is like being in that moment. Because if you're not in that moment, because like when you're going out and then, the next day you're sleeping through most of the day or so, and then you're not really compass mentors, and then as you said earlier in the show as well, you said, then you're just waiting for that next drink, I suppose. But what's
And
surprised? Sorry,
there
go.
were blackouts, so there I would lose chunks of an evening, and then I have to phone people and be like, how did I get home? What happened? What did I say? Or I'd be worried, like, what did I say? So I'd try to gauge people's moods or reactions to me, like, because I just didn't remember.
Mm. And that's where the guiltiness and the shame kind of comes in as well, I suppose, as well,
Yeah.
right? Because you're not sure. Um, and was it with any alcohol? Just after, well, not off topic, but kind of related. But was it any alcohol? Because I found like certain people, I mean, if they drank like Jägermeister as an example, I mean, they would completely black out. I mean, Jägermeister was like a no, but like people like would. So was it like a normal event that you would black out, or it depended on like the
Uh,
amount of alcohol?
it was because, so my poison of choice was Sauvignon Blanc,
Okay.
cold.
Yeah.
And if it was a spirit, it was a tequila, Don Julio, or Jose Cuervo, a double with a shot of lime on ice. So those were my two go-to drinks, and occasionally red wine. But the thing is, it was the volume.
Okay.
That was the problem,
Mm.
is that, like, and I drink fast. So,
Okay.
while some people are still mulling of their first one, I'm knocking into my second one. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like I was chasing. And so
Mm.
I was drinking. And when I was drinking by myself, it was like I was knocking back a bottle, and then that wasn't enough. So I was climbing into the second bottle, and that's where the blackout came in.
Mm.
Like it's like 3 glasses. I can remember 4 things, get 5. So
Okay.
there's always like a point in the evening that my mind, I would always remember, okay, and then it's like,
Okay.
and then I have to do a recon. I look at my phone. Oh my God, who did I call? Oh, if I was by myself.
Okay. Were you one of the drunk callers? Okay.
Yeah, drunk calling people, having deep conversations and not remembering them next day, or people calling you like, yeah, you called me yesterday, you were a bit liquored. Was everything okay? Being overly friendly with people. So then when they meet you when you're sober, you're kind of like, hey, like, step back. And they're like, oh, but the last time we were having such a good time.
Hmm. Hmm. And I
So
suppose, especially with work functions, that must be difficult, hey? Or work colleagues.
not so much. I knew how to regulate myself at work. So work wasn't like, for me, I knew I was at work, and I needed, like, even though I was drinking with the group, I needed to make sure that the group got home safely. I needed to make sure they got into their rooms. I needed to be the first person up. So when we were at work, it was actually, I was quite controlled, even though I was drinking, and sometimes I would forget little bits of a conversation or what happened, but I was quite controlled. It was socially where it was just like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was by myself, those two were the two dangerous areas. In a work situation, because I knew I had to be responsible. I always would rate, like, what I would do is that with the group would drink and drink and drink, and sometimes I would watch them and not drink as much, and then get back to my hotel room and order a glass of wine or 2,
Oh, okay.
and then sort of,
Yeah.
or if it was on a flight, we get onto the flight. Now it's fine. We're sitting, they're watching movies, they're drinking, I'm drinking too, but I will be the first person up in the morning to make sure that, hey, we need to get off, we need to catch a connecting flight, we need to do this.
Okay, cool. Okay, it's interesting that you could separate those out. So it seemed more like a social and a personal aspect, and I suppose, but in the one part of the book, I remember you mentioned that like texting your boss the next day saying, I had a rough night, I'm not going to be in, or dinner didn't go well. So is that how it affected work maybe a little bit?
2016, yes and no. What I was finding in what I found in 2016 is I was going to work hungover a lot more. And I remember I would go downstairs to the canteen and have like a greasy breakfast and a Coke and then take painkillers, to rectify myself. And around about 12, I'd feel good so that I could power through the day and be productive. And it was happening more and more and more and more and more. So it wasn't a matter of me not going to work. No, I was pitching up. I was just pitching up hung over and then having to sort of collect myself during the course of the day so I could be productive.
Okay, that makes sense. I think from a book point of view, I want to ask as well, because you mentioned quite a few people. Did you have to get permission to use their names?
So I asked some of my friends. I said some of the people. For instance, I mentioned doctors and stuff. The only person I mentioned in full is Professor Carol Beck, and I didn't ask her. But my own doctors, my oncologists and stuff, I just shortened their names to Dr. G. My therapist, Ingrid, I just used her first name. I didn't use her second name. Some friends I spoke to, they wanted their names changed. Some were comfortable, when I wrote the book, I was very, very conscious of not telling other people's story. The focus was about me. So I could not go into somebody else's story or tell somebody else details about somebody else. Like when I'm talking about other people, it's in connection to me. I am the focus. It is about me. So I tried very hard to do that.
Okay, that's thanks for clarifying that. I wasn't sure what the process is. So yeah.
You do have to ask people if they're comfortable, and it's surprising. Some people, no, change my name. And like, if you only knew the part that I'm writing about, we're not even drinking, but okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I suppose with age as well, maybe you forget as well. But I think what you said now, especially writing the book, you have to relive some of that, what you can remember and kind of piece it together and do that, which must have been, pretty interesting. But yeah, there's always drinking stories though, people remember, like even when, as I said, with my extended family, I mean, there's drinking stories through our family. And, when we get together, it's always like, oh, you remember that time? And yeah, it's always like that.
Yeah, definitely. When I look back on it, I didn't put it in as much as I could have. I could have gone to town. And I think I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be about how it was affecting me, and this journey that I was on to try and, my denial, to try and manage it, to hide from it, so all those other aspects. If I'd just written a book about my drinking tales, it would have been a fun, fabulous book.
Which is probably an interesting point to start on, which is, what do you want to get out of the whole experience and the book, Thando?
when I was in therapy, one of the things I spoke about was the fact that I had never, as a writer, I had never written my own story. I always told other people's stories. And when I told my own story, I always wrote it under a pseudonym. So if I tell excerpts about myself, and I had a column in the Sunday Times Lifestyle, and I hated it. And because I had to write what I was thinking about myself. And I struggled to do it. It was such a tedious process because I didn't want to be honest. And so when it came to writing this book, it was like, okay, I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell my story and I'm going to be honest about it. The other part of it is that when I realized I had a problem and I started looking for books to read, there's a whole section called Quitlet. And there are lots of books you can get, but they're written by white people and white women specifically. And I couldn't find a Black woman's experience of being an alcoholic, recovering, anything. You know what I mean? There were books out there that touched on the subject, but it wasn't the main part of the subject. So writing the book, there were lots of reasons why I decided to do it. You know, one was to tell my story, and as a writer to own my story and the other part of it is that there are hardly any books about recovery and the Black experience.
Is I mean, I have to ask though, is there a reason for that? And you know, the things that scream to mind for me is that does it become more an acceptance thing then? You know, like you have to be, you know, like you know, is that a driver? You know, like for like almost I mean, like drinking a lot more. I mean, is there a reason? Well, is there a reason, firstly, that, you know, there isn't as many books because maybe there's not enough people telling it for some reason. Maybe they're not writers and storytellers like yourself. And secondly, I mean, yeah, is it, you know, like, do you think it's more of an issue, I think, in the community?
Is drinking an issue in the Black community? Definitely.
Yeah.
You know, just the response I've gotten from people, like, I've got this book, they're like, oh my God, I know people, you know. And what I find is that online, there are lots of, on Instagram, Facebook, there are lots of recovery pages and groups run by Black women. And some of them, you know, with a huge following. Black Sober Girls Club, I think, is one. And they have like 30,000 followers based in the US. My thinking is that perhaps there isn't people who want to tell the story. Or number two is that publishing is quite discriminate.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And in what they think is interesting or what they think people want to know. So I'm hoping for with this book is just, you know, if somebody Googles Black woman alcoholic, okay, hopefully my name doesn't come up all the time. um,
Definitely.
but you know that there is a book that, you know, I'm here. I'm on the other side of it, you know. And I'm a Black woman.
I love the transparency. I mean, I've been following many entrepreneurs over the many years, and I think that's been a key trend, you know, keeping it real. I mean, even if you look at social media platforms like TikTok now, you know, they're all promoting that authentic self in a way and, you know, trying not to dress it up and be the best version. And I really like that. I also like the idea of what you said is in terms of almost pushing the narrative around some of the preconceptions that we have. I mean, I think of maybe it was last year or the previous year, but the, you know, the head of Ultron who stepped down now, but Mteto Nyati, I think. He came
Okay.
out with the book, betting on a darkie, and it was about showing that leadership can be done, like, and it doesn't just have to be a white person that does it. And I thought that was interesting, like, because Ultron became one of the darlings of the JSE over the last few years, and he completely turned that whole company around, and which was an amazing story. And I thought that was pretty cool. I love the story as well, and if anything, just helping us almost address it and say, actually, maybe there is a problem. Maybe we should be looking at this. And I feel quite excited about it for you as well, because maybe this is a start, like you said, like having pseudonames and ghostwriting, but at least this could be Tando's thing, like,
Yeah.
you always need an edge. And now it opens up opportunities and doors and all of that stuff, going forward in terms of you finding that authentic voice as well and
Yeah.
saying, this is what I'm about. And, I'm not sure if you thought further than that and how this turns out, but that is already amazing. I think where it
Oh,
is.
I have thought far, like my
Okay.
visions and my manifestations are huge, but I'm
Oh,
not going to share
amazing.
them.
Okay. Well, at least you have the dream and you have the plans, which is always amazing. It starts with that because that's how the neural pathways work. Um, if we had to introduce the show, because you're such a good storyteller, how would you headline it? How would you introduce yourself to the world in terms of telling that story?
Wow.
Would it be the book title, On the
Mm,
Rocks with Thando Pato?
yeah, On the Rocks, a, a memoir of a high functioning alcoholic.
Okay.
Um, book is the book is about recovery. It's about mental health. It's about denial. It's about self-discovery. It's about self-betrayal. It's about self-love. It's a book about growth.
Mm.
I think you meet me at a particular point in my life and you go in this, like, the book is about 4 years in my life, so it's not my entire drinking journey, no. And you go on this journey with me as as life happens, and I try and deal with it, and just how disconnected I was. I think that's what scared me. How disconnected I was from my own feelings. Like, whenever an emotion would pop up, my first instinct was to drown it. Um, you know, part of this in a lot in this book, I talk about I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I did not allow myself to feel in that year. I was terrified. I was terrified. And like now I can say it, I was terrified and I was anxious. And even though, things were clear, like I had to go through chemotherapy, and that is a mental journey. For me, chemotherapy wasn't a physical journey, it was a mental, and it really messed with me in through, and I was also put into menopause, and so my body changed and my hormones were going, so there was all these things happening, and my solace was alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the difficulty with life as well. Hey, I mean, it's not a linear path. Firstly, I mean, they don't tell you most of the things, and I mean, I think each one of us lives our own journey, and we try to make the best at that moment. But even what you just said now, I mean, it's pretty deep and profound, and I can't imagine what that must have been like going through it. And I think anyone looking at it as well says, okay, cool, I can understand why Tanda went down that route. And I think there would be almost like a level of acceptance around it. But what's amazing about the story that you've penned is the fact that you decided it was not acceptable for you, and I think that is amazing. And I remember the first time I met you as well, and we were speaking about motorcycles actually, because you were going for motorcycle lessons, and I thought that's interesting here because you don't find, well, many women that want to do that, and then secondly, many women that are actually doing it. And I think at that point, and I don't know if it's changed now, but you already bought the motorcycle and you were just like trying to figure out, how to ride it properly, and you had like lessons. And I see even in the book you do mention it a little bit in terms of not going for your lessons.
Well, I eventually sold the bike. And what I realized with motorcycle lessons is I love being on a motorcycle. I really, really love it, but I love it as a passenger, not being in control. I'm a great driver. I know how to drive. I was probably an asshole. There's a particular brand I used to work for, which is renowned for being assholes on the road. So I'm one of those. But when it comes to a bike, I have a level of an anxiety and and self-trust issues that I just couldn't get past. So I'm comfortable in a yard going around in circles and stuff like that. But the idea of the road and there's so many elements to it. Like a bike is more visceral, like the clutches here, it's not like in a car where you sit back and
Yeah.
it's at your feet, and if you've got a manual, you keep changing gear here. It's a totally different experience. So one of the things I had to make peace with is the fact that I love motorcycles. I still do. I think people who can ride motorcycles, I love them already, even though I don't know their personalities. But I made peace with the fact that I am a passenger, not, and I enjoy it more as a passenger, because you literally hold on to somebody and then you take in the world as you see it, as it comes to you. And I enjoy that much more than being in control of it.
Okay, you said that really well, and I think the thing about being on a motorcycle is how vulnerable you are to everything. I mean, firstly, you
Yeah.
have to control this beast, and then secondly, you have to watch out for all of these things that are happening around you. And for me, I mean, like it's almost like it's like life, eh? Like you're trying your best to control stuff, but like there's these things that are, well, South African roads, probably like a taxi is coming out, maybe a pedestrian along there that side, and then the brand of the car you just mentioned is probably coming up the rear. It's like all of those things are all happening at once, and then you have to turn, and yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, as you said, I mean, I think and I think the other thing with motorcycling, you would have seen as well, is that there's a level of respect. And I think there was this guy I worked with, and he was a mechanic, for a motorcycle. Yeah, he was a mechanic, and he was never in an accident. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him for a few years now, but and he's ridden for over 20 years, and he always said when he gets onto the motorcycle, it's almost like game face on. Like you have to be in like another zone. You have to be, perfectly compass mentis, and so drinking and riding is definitely a no-no. All of those kind of things, so it teaches you a lot. But it's interesting
It
for
does.
me.
And there's a great family and community around it, and it's sort of like, when you tell somebody I'm learning how to ride, they get excited. They're like, oh, cool. Let me know if you know this. What are you doing? Who are you with? Da, da, da. There's a great, yeah, I enjoyed the community aspect of it, and even on the road, like the little signals riders give each other, like
Mm,
overtake. I thought it was the coolest thing. But it's very, there's I think I had to understand myself better and who I was, and that I suffer from anxiety, and so writing is a totally different experience for me.
mm,
I'm never going to be in the back. I'm never going to be riding S1000RR.
Is that your dream bike?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's something. I mean, I was taking our daughter to an appointment yesterday or the previous day, and a super bike pulls up next to us, and I just put my windows down because there's something about that sound. It either does something for you or it doesn't, and for most people, it does something for them, but you can't replicate it.
No,
Um,
you can't.
no.
And also just I mean, you spoke about how vulnerable you are on a bike. It's like you're naked because
Mm,
it's the machine between your legs and a helmet, but everything is just within touching distance. You know, you don't have the bubble that you have when you're in a car.
mm,
And it's exhilarating. It's
mm.
absolutely it's terrifying, terrifying, exhilarating, all at the same time.
Yeah, no, no, agreed. And you can't switch off. I think with a car, I mean, like so often, I mean, like I do it all the time. But like, if you're familiar with the route, I mean, you do zone out. Maybe it's like drinking actually, because at certain points you do black out. It's like, how did I get here? But with a bike, I don't think you can do that. You can't
No,
zone
you
out.
can't. You have to be
Yeah,
present.
yeah, and so yeah, I mean, that's a cool lesson. I think we could probably spin that into a whole different discussion on how motorcycling is probably good for society. But yeah, in terms of this book, I mean, again, well done. Is there anything around this? And I mean, with the I say this with everything, but I hope the book launch goes amazing. I'm sure it will. You've got some really serious backers behind you, in terms of Melinda and the rest of that team, and the people that have written, the reviews for you, and also seeing it in exclusive books, I think would be amazing. We'll include all of those details. Is there an electronic version as well? Is it going to be on
Yes,
Amazon and
so
stuff?
it will be available, not just exclusive books, but all major bookstores countrywide, online, Amazon. So take a lot. It's available in e-format. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, I'm a
So
big Kindle fan,
yeah.
so we'll definitely get the Kindle versions, and I'll add that to the links for the show. But yeah, well done. And just
Thank
before
you.
I let you go, though, is there anything around this topic that you thought I should have asked you that I didn't? Around the book, around you as Thando Pato, around the subject matter?
Not really. One of the things I think I wanted to highlight in the book, and I think that it's an important discussion that we need to have. I talk about going to AA and how it didn't work for me, and I'm expecting a serious backlash from that community because it is a community, but also that recovery is a very personal journey, and not everything what works for somebody else may not work for you. You know what I mean? So you may read this book and be like, but I need to go to rehab. I need AA. And that's fine. That's, your personal, you when you recover, you have to find what's comfortable for you. I when I went to the AA meetings, it wasn't that they weren't working for me. I wasn't ready to get sober. So I didn't know. And then I had to get sober in the pandemic at home alone. So I used online, and that worked for me, you know, and my therapist. So I think the recovery journey is a deeply personal one, and it's not a one size fits all. So if you go to AA or NA and you're not comfortable, it's not the end of the world. Find the space that works for you. That's what's important, because you have to find the space that works for you so that you can maintain it. If you can't maintain it, yeah.
Mm, I like that. I mean, everything about what you said, and I think hopefully that's the angles that you're going to bring out for after the book is launched, is the fact that I think, well, firstly, mental health is not, like, I think it's still very misunderstood. I think what you mentioned was probably the first time we've had, because we speak to many practitioners as well, but I think the role of therapy is massive, in people, how because you don't know what you don't know, right? But you need someone to be honest with you, and sometimes, like, has to scream at you and say, actually, you're doing nonsense. And, like, we spoke about this for 5 times, but you're still doing that, and there's something about, like, you don't get that with family most of the time. You don't get it with your social circle, and you need someone that's on your side, but that's going to hold you accountable. And I think, whether that's a coach or therapist, but what I like about the therapy model is at least it comes from a discipline. Sorry, you were going to say?
And I'm going to say something else that's going to upset people, okay? Your pastor cannot be your therapist. Your pastor has a role and your therapist has a role. Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child, she suffers from depression, severe depression, and she said it well. She said, prayer is a weapon, therapy is a strategy. And that's what, mental health is a spectrum, and therapy helps you manage it. Do you know what I mean? And you are not going to get the kind of help and management you need from your pastor, your best friend, your family. You must probably be burdening those people. You know what I mean? Your therapist is there to carry the weight of you and to help you navigate this journey so that you can go out into the world and function.
Well said. I mean, that is amazing. And I think if more people firstly get to that level of understanding and consciousness, that would be amazing, because I think it would make, the world a better place. And secondly, I mean, I think what you said about, the AA and NA, if it's not working, find an alternative. I mean, we had Ryan Barnard on, and he's a recovering drug addict. And he said, went through every program, and eventually he couldn't, it didn't work for him, and he created his own. I mean, he created a drug rehab center. And I think it's the same kind of thing. It's like, find whatever is going to work for you, but there is help around, and you just have to tap into that. And I think, hopefully this book starts, opening up those conversations. And I think hopefully, you get seen as a leader in terms of maybe helping people, to make those brave steps as well. So yeah, well done. Thanks very much for your time, and thanks very much for doing this.
Thank you, Oliver. I really enjoyed that.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned, and we'll speak to you in the next episode.